Man, welcome back. Brackets here. Best day of the year, or one of, other than Thursday, Friday coming up this week. But what a thrill, right? First of all, before we really jump into anything, but the bracket's here, and I couldn't be more excited. It's only been out for 5 hours and 5 minutes at this point, and it's like Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second best day of the year. Obviously, the most exciting day of the year is that Thursday at 12 or 12:40 or whenever they start the games. Is like that's definitely the when it feels like Christmas. But right now, it's Christmas Eve. I'd say being able to fill out all of our brackets here and just really dissect this for the next 2 to 3 days. I mean, the first four games are obviously coming around, and we'll probably talk about that here in a couple seconds about our thoughts on that. But overall, yeah, definitely super excited to, dissect these games. We're going to go through all of them, try to get through every single matchup. And, I think it's going to be a super interesting tournament. I think there could be a lot of parity in this tournament. So, yeah, definitely excited to get into it.
Yeah. And before we jump in to anything further, I want to give a shout out to you, Cody. You called it with West Virginia last night. For anyone that listened, Cody said West Virginia, bold prediction, they're going to be the first team out. And sure enough, they've been in every bracket projection since the beginning, really. I mean, since they had that stretch at Battle for Atlantis.
Yeah.
They've been in every field. And then slowly over the last few days, they've started to slip after their loss to Colorado last week. And you were all over that.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a stat or something like that. They were literally in every single projection to make it into the field. It's the first time ever that a team hasn't made the field after being in all, I think it's like 111 bracket projections on Bracket Matrix, and they were in every single one. Then did make the field. It was pretty incredible. They obviously took the Vries injury into account, and I guess how they were playing lately, and guess how they just played without him overall. So, I mean, yeah, I did call it as more of a bold prediction. Like if I had to actually pick, or if it was up to me to decide like who's going to get into the tournament, I would have said West Virginia over a team like North Carolina. I guess is the one that I would say they would get in over. But overall, yeah, it was more just a bold take. And obviously the head of the committee is the AD at North Carolina, so I guess people say I didn't play a role. He was out of the room when the discussions were being had, but come on. I mean, they're talking to him about the resume of North Carolina at some point. So yeah, ultimately I didn't think it was the right choice, but yeah, it's just kind of how it broke.
Yeah. Other than the North Carolina choice, any other big surprises for you in this field?
I guess Louisville being an 8 seed, I thought that was a little bit weird. I think their resume has been pretty damn good throughout the year, and like they kind of ran through the ACC. Like obviously the three teams at the top, Duke, Louisville, and Clemson, kind of had their way with the ACC. So I was a little bit surprised to see them on the 8 line, and then Indiana being out. Obviously, I thought just looking at the resumes, I thought they also had a better resume than a team like North Carolina. I don't hate to pick on them, but that's obviously the the discussion or the talk of what happened around the bubble. Is I mean, you look at, I mean, they have probably the two or three best wins that if you look at both of those resumes, like, beating Michigan State on the road and then beating Purdue at home, or those are two wins that North Carolina can't say that they have. So overall, I was a bit surprised, and I just didn't think it was the right decision to leave Indiana out. I thought I would have put Indiana in over West Virginia probably as well. So definitely just a bit unfortunate that the committee went in that direction. But overall, I don't get too fired up about these decisions. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I'm just happy that a bracket's out and we can kind of talk about our thoughts and, who our dark horses are and other stuff like that.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised by Xavier. What were they? They were the third to last team in, I think. It went
I believe so, yeah.
Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, and then North Carolina was last team in. I was pretty surprised by that, just because again, to last night on our pod, we talked about their resume, and they haven't really. I mean, they had a few good wins, but they also lost a lot of the games that they probably needed. To me, I would have rather seen a team like Boise State in the field than them with Boise State's resume.
Yeah, once I saw like New Mexico and Utah State on the 10 line, I was like, there's no way Boise's getting in at this point. Like they're kind of not valuing the Mountain West all that highly. And maybe that's from the past tournaments where they really just they can't win any games. Like I think they have like one of the lowest win percentages of any conference in the entire country. And they get what 4 or 5 teams in every year, at least the last couple of years they have. And I mean, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't have thought that 4 teams get in with a 5th team having a chance. I just didn't think the Mountain West was all that great this season. But yeah, it does kind of suck. I have a soft spot for the Mountain West. I would have liked to see them get in, but yeah, it's unfortunate. I did think they had a better resume than Xavier.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, enough about what could have been or what should have been. Going to dive right into the bracket. So just looking at it, very surface level. Any big matchups that stand out to you? Matchups you're looking forward to over the first week here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for the mid-major versus high major on like the 5 line. Like the 5-12 games always are the most exciting, especially for the first round. Obviously, the one that sticks out for me, Michigan, UC San Diego. I mean, we've talked about UC San Diego on here a little bit. I love that team. I think they're, probably the top mid-major in the entire country. So, and we'll talk about that game in a separate preview in a little bit. But I also like Liberty and Oregon. I think that's a pretty exciting game. Oregon's not a team I love to watch day in and day out, but it's just fun to see these top mid-majors go up against these power conference teams that are a bit vulnerable, and we can kind of see how they stack up. A couple other ones. I mean, Clemson McNeese is exciting as well. Besides that, obviously Kansas and Arkansas with the coaching battle there with Self and Calipari. But yeah, besides that, I kind of like my favorite games to watch that I have my eyes glued to the TV are the 5-12 games and the 4-13 games, especially like in the first round. They're super exciting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I'm really looking forward to that San Diego and Michigan game. Another one I have my eye on is Missouri and Drake. Kind of a clashing of styles a little bit. Drake, likes to slow it down, and that is conducive to success typically in the tournament. If you can take care of the ball, limit possession count, and get some stops, secure rebound, like control the glass, or maybe not control it, but limit the glass. These mid majors can hang around. So that's another game for me. One I'm also looking forward to is Wisconsin, Montana. I'm kind of high on Montana as a 14. Wisconsin's offense is really good. Obviously, they struggled shooting the ball today big time against Michigan. But this Montana offense has some players too. Malik Moore, Money Williams. Like I think that's a fun game. And then VCU and BYU is really a clashing of styles. VCU is top 10 scoring defense in the country, just around I think 61, 62 points a game. BYU, obviously high octane offense, top 30 in points per game in the country. Super efficient, especially over the last 6-8 weeks. I think they've made 15 plus threes in feels like 4 of their last 6 games. So that game to me has a lot of appeal because BYU is really fun to watch. VCU obviously really good on the defensive end. BYU struggles taking care of the ball at times. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game. And VCU is a team I think that doesn't get talked about much, despite how good they probably are.
Yeah, they've been really good, and they're super talented, and they're probably the more athletic team in this game too. And they have a lot of fun players on that roster, like Max Shulga and Philip Russell are 2 of the most fun shot makers in the country. When Philip Russell goes on a heater, he's one of the best players in the entire country. You can't really convince me otherwise. He's just a mid-range assassin. He can shoot off the dribble from 3. He's just extremely fun to watch, and he's super fiery. So he can really make a fan base really upset if you're going up against him. But yeah, that's definitely a fun matchup that I'm looking forward to. I think VCU is kind of live there, honestly, but yeah, definitely one I'll have my eyes on.
Yeah. And then obviously you mentioned Kansas and Arkansas, and then the winner of that more than likely is going to get Rick Pitino in the second round. So
Yeah,
interesting little like 4-team pod there from a coaching perspective. You have to think that the committee maybe takes some of that into account for some storyline stuff.
for sure. Yeah, and obviously, I mean, Kansas and Arkansas, people are going to be really excited for that. I don't think it's the highest quality of game that we're going to see in the first round. Obviously, it's just more of a fun team with some, well-known players there as well, and obviously Self and Calipari are going to go at it, and it's going to be probably one of the most watched games, just because a lot of people know who they are. But I'll most likely be looking in another direction if there's another time in a game in that time slot. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to probably have a quad box running, so it's not really going to matter. So definitely going to watch every game possible. So
Right. Anyway, moving on. Favorite first round upsets. I know probably what your top one is. We've already talked about it a little bit, but I'll let you start here.
yeah, I mean, it's not even really a crazy upset if you look at the odds board. I mean, you see San Diego, they're sitting at like +2.5, +3, but that's definitely my favorite, and they have a ton of advantages. They can turn over Michigan at an elite level. I think they have the best turnover margin in the entire country. So I think that's a major edge in this game. And I think their shooting ability, if they can keep up on the glass, it's going to be a little bit tough against Wolf and Golden, but I do really like this defense a lot. And that's a major edge, especially in a tournament setting where, shot making at times can be at a premium. So I definitely like teams that can win games in other ways. And this is one of the best coach teams in the entire country, a coach that nobody knows, and Eric Olin, brought this team up from D3. This is their first year being eligible for the tournament in D1, and he took them all the way to the tournament. He's got them all the way into the top 50 in Ken Palm. I mean, it's one of the best coaching jobs that I've seen in recent memory, one of the better coaching jobs that I can even think of. So, yeah, and they have a extremely fun offense with, led by Anawanawa Tate Jones, who's not really an explosive shooter by any means. Obviously, he doesn't take a ton of threes, but he can really initiate this offense as a point forward and, set up guys like Tyler McGuy and Hayden Gray, who are elite 3-point shot makers. So, yeah, I definitely like this UC San Diego team a lot, maybe a little bit too much, but I do think Michigan is extremely vulnerable in the first round. And I think there's kind of some runway for UC San Diego to even win a second round matchup. And obviously you'd run into Auburn at that point after, so it would get a little bit tough because they're not a super athletic team by any means, but super well coached, really defensive minded team. They turn over teams at an elite rate, like I said. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite one.
Yeah, no, I definitely love that one. San Diego, UC San Diego is a great team. They really have, I think, the pieces here to take down Michigan. I am a little bit worried about Michigan's size, but I also think that the turnovers that they can force might not even allow Michigan to get into anything, just because Michigan turns it over I think like 14, 15 times a game, and
yeah, it's a crazy amount.
UC San Diego turns people over 16 plus a game. So, if they can just turn them over in the backcourt, like especially if they can jump out early, I think that Michigan playing from behind here in this game plays significantly to UC San Diego's advantage, because Michigan, I think, will kind of go away from what they might have as an advantage with their size here.
Yeah, and I mean, UC San Diego is also the best transition defense in the country on a points per possession basis. And they only allow you to get out in transition like 12% of the time. It's a big factor for Michigan's offense. And when you get them in a half court setting, they do get significantly worse. And obviously it's probably going to lead to more turnovers with, a less spaced floor. You're not able to get out in transition, that Danny Wolf Golden pick and roll game isn't really going to work. They're not really going to have avenues in the post up game either because UC San Diego traps basically every single post up. So forcing Golden to pass out of post up situations, I think, could lead to a bunch of turnovers as well. And I'm not super high on the Michigan shooters to be able to capitalize on those threes on the weak side shooter threes. I don't really think they're going to have really much of a chance there. Like besides like Namari Burnett, like Donaldson's been very in and out, and we know what Roddy Gale is as a shooter. It's not all that pretty. So yeah, overall, I definitely like the matchup for UC San Diego.
Yeah, and then one of my favorite upsets is it's not a huge upset probably. New Mexico over Marquette. I kind of like this matchup here for New Mexico, particularly on the glass. Like I am a little bit worried because New Mexico does force a lot of turnovers, but Marquette is in the bottom. They're like in the top 5 in the country in turnovers per game at like 9.5 or so. So if Marquette is able to take care of the ball against this elite turnover forcing defense of New Mexico, it could be a tough day. But, I think especially the way Nelly Jr. Joseph's been playing, his activity on the glass, I think, could be a problem for like Ben Gold here in this game. Donovan Dent is as advertised. He's legit. And I really, he even though they lost to Boise the other night, he made some really clutch plays down the stretch in that game, not only making shots when needed, but also making high-level passes to Nelly Jr. Joseph down low on pick and rolls and stuff. I don't necessarily consider this to be like a huge upset pick. I think they're like +3.5, +3. But I don't have a ton of faith in this Marquette team, especially in tight games. They haven't been very good, especially over the last month and a half or so. So I'm going to go out and say New Mexico gets the job done with Nelly Jr. Joseph kind of being the X factor here.
Yeah, I think he would definitely be the X factor as well. They don't really have an answer for him. Like I don't think like Ben Gold at the 5 isn't really going to have a ton of success there. So they're probably going to have to go in a different direction. Probably Royce Parham's going to get a lot of minutes in this game. I don't think that's like a major upgrade on the glass by any means. So, and it's two teams that, the turnover margin, that's kind of where they make their money. Obviously Marquette's a little bit better in that area, but the fact that New Mexico can keep up in that area, I think is pretty important. I think New Mexico's going to have to shoot it fairly well to win this game. And I'm not super high on their shooters. I'm not really that high on their offense in general when they can't get out in transition. Marquette's a pretty good transition defense as well. So, but I do kind of consider this game to be a coin flip. I've had a tough time deciding who I'm like going to pick in my bracket in that game. So yeah, definitely a pretty good upside call there.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit about maybe some players to watch that aren't getting enough respect or undervalued, underrated because of maybe where they go to college. Not on the national stage very often. So I'll let you start with this one. Any players to you that really stand out here that people by the end of this tournament are going to be like, all right, I know his name.
Yeah, I had Anawanwa Tate Jones written down, talked about him a little bit, just like an elite point forward. Doesn't get it done with his shooting. He can score in a lot of different ways, and he's an elite passer out of the post. And obviously you can run offense through him. So I think he's fantastic. And then talked about Shulga and Philip Russell a little bit. Had those guys jotted down. I just think they're super fun shot makers that if they go on a run, they're going to be like they'll be that Cinderella. They'll be the national story really if they're able to at least get through the first weekend just because they're super fiery players, super fun to watch. Then one other one I had written down, we've talked about him a little bit on the pod here, and it's Bennett Sturts at Drake. I mean, he's essentially the entire offense for that team. He's averaging close to 20 points per game. They kind of just run a ton of ball screens for him until they can free up anything on the offensive end. And, he's a really good tough shot maker late in the clock. Ben McCollum the coach at Drake, he really asks a lot of him, and he's basically, he always has the ball in his hands, and if there's 5 seconds or less on the clock, he's probably taking a contested shot, and it goes in a lot of the time. So, and it's obviously like Drake, it's not a super fun style to watch, but he can drag them out of the mud at times, and when he goes on a run, he's the best player on the floor.
Yeah, no, some great players there that definitely, hopefully, will get their flowers over the course of this tournament. A few for me. Talked about them a little bit already. The duo Malik Moore and Money Williams, 2 leading scorers at Montana. I think especially Money Williams, sophomore, just kind of plays. He's kind of a polarizing player. Comes off the bench, but he plays about 30 minutes a game average. He's their leading scorer, like 13 and a half a game. But he's capable of going crazy. I know a few weeks ago I watched a game where he had like 36, I think. I could see him easily just getting red hot in one of these tournament games because he can get it going from all 3 levels. Malik Moore, he's struggled with foul trouble a little bit lately. Hasn't shot it great, but he's another guy that can really get it going from deep. So this Montana team, I think, could make a little bit of noise in that matchup against Wisconsin. Maybe not pull off the upset, but they could hang around, I think, with these guys. And then guy on kind of a power team, of course, but a guy that hasn't been talked about much. Guy that I think maybe by the end of this week, depending on how BYU does, might become some people's most loved player and some people's most hated player. I just think the way that he plays, like sometimes he just gets it going, and his demeanor sometimes I think can really piss people off. But he's a really confident player, and that's Richie Saunders at BYU. He's been red hot as of late. He gets a shot off so fast. Like Kevin Young was talking, he thinks he has the fastest shot in the country. And he's always got the same catch every time. His footwork's elite on catch and shoot opportunities. So, and he's much improved off the bounce too. So I think he could be a guy to look at by the end of this tournament that people are pretty well aware of. That is, if BYU can get by VCU. And then the last one for me is Jacob Ognisevich, I think is how you say it. I'm not 100% sure, but at Lipscomb. Lipscomb plays Iowa State here. Iowa State got the unfortunate news Keyshawn Gilbert's going to miss the entire rest of the season. But Ognisevich, he's averaging over 20, 8 rebounds as well, shooting 57% from the field, but also over 40% from 3. He could be a guy that kind of maybe takes over this game or can really keep Lipscomb in it, depending on how Iowa State's playing in this one. So Lipscomb does a great job taking care of the ball, which we'll talk about a little bit when we get to our game-by-game previews. So, if they can take care of the ball against this Iowa State defense that really likes to force turnovers and get out and run, like this is a guy I think that could be the reason why they stay in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a ton of shooters at their disposal as well, and that's just kind of how they run their offense. They take care of the ball at an elite rate, and they shoot the 3 at like a top 25 rate in the entire country. So yeah, there'll be a tough matchup for teams that allow a lot of spot up opportunities, and he's kind of the head of the snake there. So yeah, definitely there'll be a fun game to watch, and he'll be a fun player to watch. I mean, if he makes 5 or 6 threes, he could be the guy that we're talking about. He could be the, I don't know, Jack Golke. I mean, I think he's way better than Jack Golke, obviously.
The Doug Eddert.
Yeah, no, we don't even want to talk about that guy. Hey, yeah, good run, but I think Ognisevich, definitely a player worthy of getting those flowers.
Yeah. Now, give me your favorite potential matchup later in the tournament. If you had to pick one later in the tournament, what's the game you're looking forward to the most?
That's an interesting one. I would say maybe Florida, St. John's if we got that. I don't know. I just think seeing St. John's like late in the tournament, seeing Patino late in the tournament would be a pretty cool thing against like one of the elite teams in the country. I think that would be. I mean, that would be one of the most watched games. Like that would probably be the most watched non-Final Four game. So I think that's just the one that kind of sticks out. Seeing where St. John's stacks up against like a truly elite team in the country, maybe even them in the round before that against Texas Tech. I mean, I think that's a super fun. I mean, I would say Texas Tech wins that game, but that's just one that sticks out right away.
Yeah, that Texas Tech St. John's one was the one that I'm really looking forward to. Hopefully, we can get that one. The other one for me is BYU Alabama. This game I think could be really electric. Like no shortage of offense here, no shortage of shot making. A difference in athleticism, absolutely. But I think that this game could be played in the 90s if all kind of goes the way that it's been going for both teams shooting the ball. So this game, I think, would just be more of like a fun watch. I definitely would expect Alabama to win, but I think this game, from an offensive perspective, could be really exciting for fans.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, could look kind of similar to like the Alabama Florida games, although the last one wasn't all that close. Just like the pace and the the scoring ability of both teams would be super exciting. And then one other one, just like one that's like pretty likely to happen, like Houston Gonzaga. I think in the second round over there would be pretty exciting. Gonzaga is obviously like an analytical darling that hasn't really got the resume wins to obviously get them above an 8 seed. So it is a bit unfortunate for Houston to have to play this game in the second round against one of the most talented teams in the country. But I think for a second round game, for potentially not a vulnerable 1 seed, but like in this situation, maybe, I think that'd be a really fun game to watch on, I believe they would play on Saturday.
Yeah. So we got the 4-1 seeds, right? We've got Auburn, Duke, Houston, and Florida in that order. Of those four, who do you think is the number 1 seed that goes down first?
I mean, if I had to pick one, I guess I would have to say it's Houston just because they have to play Gonzaga. But yeah, I guess that's the one I'll go with, the one to go down first. I really would rather not see them go down first. I think there's a real possibility that all 4 1 seeds could get into the Final Four. I think those teams are so far ahead of, they're not extremely far ahead of like the 2s and 3s, but I think they have a leg up on that second tier in the entire country. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we saw that happen. I mean, I think it would upset a lot of people to see 4 1 seeds in the Final Four, but I mean, for viewing purposes, like for actual game quality, I think that would be extremely exciting for me. But if I had to pick one, I'll say Houston just because there's that landmine with the 8 seed with Gonzaga.
Yeah. I think maybe an unpopular pick, but I think for me it would be Auburn. They see Texas A&M potentially in the Sweet 16. I could see that being trouble for them. They've already lost to them once, right? I think Auburn would win that game this time, but Auburn hasn't been playing fantastic lately. So I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn were to go down. And then, before that, they see the winner of Louisville and Creighton. Obviously, Louisville just lost in the ACC championship game. And then Creighton was controlling a good chunk of that game against St. John's yesterday until they melted per usual. But I think that Auburn doesn't necessarily have a cakewalk of a path. I think their region is loaded.
Yeah, and I mean that game potentially against Louisville is at Rupp Arena, so I mean you're going to see a million Louisville fans there. It's basically going to be a home game for them. So I mean Auburn obviously travels well, and they'll probably get their share of fans there. But I mean that's advantage Louisville. It's going to probably feel a little bit like a home game for them. And even in that first round, like I do like Louisville to win that game. Just I think they have advantages there. So yeah, definitely potential landmine there as well. I mean, I don't think Florida's a shoe in to get to the Sweet 16. Like you got the 2-time reigning national champion in UConn. Obviously, it's not the same team, but they still have a really good offense when, they're not bothered and pressured. And Florida's obviously, they're not like this elite pressure defense. They'll deploy they'll hard hedge ball screens at times and like get after you a little bit, but for the most part, they're, I'd say they're fairly conservative, and I think UConn could feel sort of comfortable for stretches of that game. And obviously, they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of shooting talent, so I think they could potentially get to the Sweet 16 as well. But I mean, the one team, the easiest path has got to be Duke, right? I mean, I'm not scared of Mississippi State or Baylor at all. And then when you get, I'm not afraid here until the Elite Eight with Duke. So if they get Alabama, I think that's the only spot that I would be all that scared. They took Arizona to the woodshed in Tucson. Like, that game wasn't even close. It wasn't even competitive. And that wasn't even the best version that we've seen from Duke. So I think Duke has a very nice path potentially to the Final Four.
Yeah. I kind of think Houston does too. Obviously seeing Gonzaga. But after that, I don't really mind their path. But Gonzaga has their issues, right? As we've talked about a bunch. And I think Houston can kind of expose Gonzaga on the defensive end, especially like getting on the glass and just kind of working them. So, I think that matchup has, obviously analytically, I think it has its concerns for Houston, but I don't know as if they'll really struggle with Gonzaga, but they definitely could. I mean, Gonzaga was a top 10 team in the country early in the season, and they were for a little bit. So you never know, really. And Mark Few obviously is one of the best coaches in the country.
Yeah, and after they get past that second round game, obviously it's not as scary for them as opposed against, or for the other one seeds, like a weak Kentucky team on the 3 line. Tennessee's offense, I don't really think, can generate all that much against Houston. Illinois is super volatile. We might not even see like Purdue or Clemson in the Sweet 16. Who knows? Like, those are, I mean, the 12 and 13 there, the McNeese and High Point are teams that can give them problems. So, I mean, they could eventually end up with a nice path, but I just think that second round matchup is going to be really tough.
Yeah. That South region, to me, I think is the hardest. Just depth overall in that bracket is really strong. I think like Auburn, Michigan State, Iowa State. Obviously, Keyshawn Gilbert's injury kind of changes them a little bit, but then A&M, Michigan, Ole Miss, who, as much as I've hated on Ole Miss, like, I do think they maybe are being a tad undervalued. And then Marquette, Louisville, Creighton, New Mexico, and then San Diego State, UNC, whoever comes out there, and then UC San Diego and Yale. I mean, I think all those teams right there are pretty quality teams that are all capable of kind of making some noise. So I don't necessarily think the South is all that easy of a bracket.
Yeah, I definitely say that's the highest quality region. But I would say it's fairly balanced overall. I don't really think there's like a team or a 1 seed that really got screwed over, or anyone that's going to have like a necessarily like a cakewalk outside of Duke. I think they have a pretty generous path, but yeah, I think there's a ton of balance. We always talk about there's always one region that, looks extremely vulnerable and then one that looks like the toughest region ever. Like, I think that UConn one when they were the 4 seed was like what they call it, like the region of death or something like that. And UConn ultimately ended up coming out of that, and it was a dogfight every game, but not for them, but for every other team in that region. But yeah, I don't really think we have that this year. I think there's a ton of balance.
Yeah. So before we wrap up our initial bracket reactions, want to just get your first reaction, Final Four, and your national champion.
Yeah. So in the East, I'm going to say Duke. Midwest, I'm going to say Houston, because I think there's a path for them after Gonzaga. So I'm okay with with taking Houston there. I'm going to take – I like Texas Tech to get to the Final Four. I think they have a pretty nice path. I think Missouri is a tough team to prepare for in that second round, but obviously, like, we're not extremely high on St. John's, especially as a 2 seed. So I do think Texas Tech is really good in this bracket. Obviously, Florida's tough, and they're playing like the best team in the country, but it's not necessarily a cakewalk for them to get to the Elite Eight. So I do like Texas Tech to get there, and then something tells me, I mean, if A&M can get by, I'm not going to pick them to go to the Final Four. I think I'll go Michigan State. If Iowa State was healthy, that's the team I would pick. But yeah, I'm going to go with Auburn. I think Texas A&M is vulnerable in that first round against Yale, and I ultimately think Auburn gets a pretty decent path because I do think UC San Diego beats Michigan, and then they'll play like a 12 or 13 seed in the Sweet 16. And I'm not extremely high on Michigan State's ceiling to get to a Final Four national championship, so I'll take Auburn.
I thought we were
you go through your Final Four first.
I thought we were going to have the same Final Four for a second. I have Duke, Houston, Texas Tech, and Michigan State.
Surely that'll work out well.
Right. So, that's kind of my initial gut feeling, but subject to change. I mean, who knows? I'm going to be doing a lot of deep diving into this over the next few days. But with that Final Four, my national champion prediction, assuming health in Cooper Flag, I have Duke winning it all. I know that's probably the trendy, popular pick, but I just don't know when this team's healthy, especially on the defensive end. I just don't know who's going to take them down, especially the growth they've shown over the course of this season.
Yeah, I'm going to take Duke as well. I think Duke matches up fairly well with Houston. They just, on the offensive end, they do everything well. They don't have a weakness on that end, like especially their shooting ability to get over the top of Houston's defense. I think is huge. I'll take Auburn to beat Texas Tech, and then I'll take Duke winning the rematch from early in the season. And I don't know if it is the trendy pick. Everyone's on Florida right now. I think every single person on ESPN or everyone on the panel today, the 4-person panel, they all took Florida. So they are the trendy pick. And like, we'll probably talk about at some point, like the teams that you should avoid taking or the teams that you should take when it comes to like a bracket pool. Like, and realistically, if Florida's going to be the super trendy pick, it's probably not the team to take if you want to win a bracket pool. You're going up against a bunch of other people if you all have the same champion. So yeah, I guess Duke, maybe they're not going to fly under the radar. I think the 3 most popular are going to be Duke, Auburn, and Florida. Maybe Auburn being the least trendy of the 3, just because they've lost 3 or 4 games. So
right.
Yeah, you could honestly take Auburn as well, but yeah.
So obviously super excited. The bracket's out. We've got a lot more content for you coming. Going to have game by game previews starting with the South that are going to be dropping out tomorrow. So looking forward to getting that content out to you guys and get active in the Discord. Love to talk some bracket stuff with you guys. So looking forward to all this content, and we'll talk to you next time.